All right, folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. Well, first off, welcome. Everyone have a good lunch? Still good today, right? Good yesterday, good today? Awesome. So we're in the home stretch of Team 22. We've got a couple more sessions left today. And, it went to the other slide there, guys. We fixed it. Okay, there we go. So we're in the final stretch here of Team 22, and we're getting into these sessions that are starting to talk about some implications in all of our worlds. And so one of the things that I've spent a lot of time with is this idea of solution building within Atlassian. So who am I? My name is Mark Cruth. I'm a senior solutions architect with Atlassian. I work primarily with products like Jira Line, and some of our other suites like Jira, Advanced Roadmaps, those sorts of things. But more specifically now, you might be wondering, well, if you're a solutions architect, why are you wearing a lab coat? I'm also that guy you've been seeing walking around in lab coats the last 2 days. I moonlight as what we call a team doctor. And I'll tell you a little bit more of that at the end of this, so you can kind of learn a little bit about that. But today I want to talk to you about this idea of solutions, because for us, there's one thing to roll out software. It's a whole other thing to roll out solutions. So let's kind of get started into this. So I want you to remember this photo right here, #sunrise. This was actually, so when I started going down this solution space, a colleague of mine, he lived in Amsterdam, he took a picture out of his back window, and this almost became a symbol for what you're going to see along the way. It's this idea of a sunrise. It's this idea of like, hey, there's some beginning, new life to this, and we even reflect that in some of the stuff you'll see, but just keep this in the back of your mind. So one of the things that kind of came up here last year through our Enterprise CAB is that, and I think many of you as customers have recognized this, is that you as our customers trust us at Atlassian to deliver Agile teamwork tools, which is good. I mean, that's kind of our bread and butter there, to do that. But there's a but there. We as Atlassian, we need to demonstrate that we can create enterprise solutions for every business need. So it's not just about building the software. It's about actually building software that solves problems. It's about building things that can actually move us from point A to point B as an organization. It's not one of those, if you build it, they will come. That we all know that almost never happens except for in those movies. So for us, this has been kind of a mantra for us. So for us, let's actually start talking about that word, solutions. One of the things I like to do is get a good definition of what this means. So when we think of the word solution, sometimes we think of products. We saw a lot of great stuff in our keynotes yesterday about, hey, open DevOps, all these different things that say, hey, a solution includes us bringing together all these different products. And it is a really good setup. But I'm going to be the one to here first tell you that this is only a partial solution. This is, again, just a set of products. A solution is something different. And for me, I want to tell you what that is. A solution for us actually is going to start with a team. It could be a big team, it could be a little team, but it starts with a team. That team's going to have a business problem they're trying to solve. They need a solution for that. And that solution is going to manifest itself through a couple different means. It's going to manifest itself with tooling, that's what we're looking at. But it's also going to be looking at things like process. What kind of practices and things are we bringing to the table? What do we know? It's going to bring about artifacts. Do we have playbooks, sprints, guidebooks, these sorts of things? And then also when we're talking about agile scale, it's going to be talking about agility. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm trying to solve these problems at an enterprise level, but if I can't solve a problem at a team level, how do I hope to get to enterprise? Understanding where we're at and bringing those together to build a plan that ultimately gets you to a business outcome. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because that's what I consider full solution. It's not just one thing, it's multiple things coming together to solve a problem. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about Atlassian solutions. So that was general solutions. Now, as you've seen with the Atlassian solution space, we've got 3 solutions that we're focused on. We've got Agile and DevOps for our tech and our business teams. We got an ITSM solution out there for our IT teams. And we have our work management solution for all teams. Now for us, we layer products across all the realms of these. They're all over the place in here. But for us today, I want us to focus on specifically the Agile and DevOps, and even more specifically, we're looking at Agile in here. So that's going to be kind of the lens to look at this from. Now, as we think about solutions, a solution journey, as we think about that picture we just laid out, it's going to start with something, and it's going to first start with understanding, at an enterprise level, your Agile journey. So let's talk about what it means to be on an Agile journey. Here's a pretty stair-step picture, right? Oh, hey, we're going to start out with some initial Agile adoption. We're going to add some more teams. We're going to establish a transformation office. This is a generic transformation story. This is where, again, if you were to synthesize a lot of things, you would see these sorts of steps playing out throughout a journey. But the thing is none of this is ever stair-step. None of this is truly that way. When we think about things, this is our plan. We're going to become agile. This is what we're going to do. But we all know when we shatter that reality, that's a little bit different. Maybe we make some progress here, maybe we lose some ground here. It's a constant journey to try to figure out how do we evolve. And so for us, it's less about following a plan. It's less about following to get from A to Z, and it's more about adaptability. It's more about finding maturity. So one thing Atlassian has been doing is we've been thinking about this from layers of agility. And you'll actually see this in the enterprise services booth. If you go to there in the expo hall, they have a slide like this, a little bit different colors on there. But it's talking about how we think about the agility curve. For us, when we work with teams, it's less about where are you at in your journey, and it's more about what attributes are you demonstrating along our agility curve. Are you at team agility, where you're just kind of getting started? You're starting to look at things like metrics. You're starting to focus on how much we're getting done. Are you moving into team of teams, where you're starting to look at the system? You're starting to employ things like DevOps to say, how do we get these multiple teams working together? Or are you starting to move into investment in enterprise agility, which again starts thinking about how we as a business work? So for us, again, it's starting to think in that realm. So this kind of gives us an idea of that, again, that agile aspect. We got to think about maturity, we got to think about that plan, but ultimately we got to help kind of bring that together. So one of the big things of this whole story here is visualizing. So for me, I'm a big picture guy. Literally, anything out there, I like to put it in a picture form. And so when we started talking about solutions, I said, we've got to visualize this out here. And so that's what we're going to spend some time doing today. So here is our solution journey slide. And if you remember that sunrise slide? You guys see the little similarities there? The idea is that we use this to help visualize that journey. Now, when we start looking at this, there's a couple things I want to introduce you to. First things first is platform layer. This is where our tools live. Our tools are always at the base of what we have because really, we're building on top of that. But it's how we take advantage of those tools, how we leverage those tools that help us to, ultimately achieve some of that agility. We could have all the right tools, but if we're still operating at team level agility, we're going to struggle. And so for us, we want to say, well, how do we use our tools and enable us along the way? Now, a couple of things I want to talk about here is when you think about this aspect of value, this top section, the idea is this is how we're extracting that value out of our tools. As I'm using certain things, I want to say, hey, I want to get the right program level value out of my products. I want to get the right portfolio level value. And one thing you're going to notice, see that connection back to that maturity model? That's intentionally done. We want to say, hey, what can we do to help you achieve that level of maturity? Versus saying, here's your path to the end of the road. Here is the maturity path. Now, the last thing I want to bring up as you orient yourself around the slide is this aspect of a center of excellence or a LACE or some sort of community of practice that's helping to drive change. And that's this area right here. And you'll notice it goes across the whole thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about how it's the power of the LACE and the COE that actually helps drive this. Now, for me, this is where I like to have my little soapbox moment. I'm going to get real with you folks because LACEs and COEs, those are pretty important things. But I'm going to just, an open company, no bullshit kind of thing, we don't do it very well. So let's talk about this. Why am I angry about this? What's my soapbox about? So many organizations separate out tooling and process. We bring in a product like, I still at some level support Jira Line. We bring in a product like Jira Line, we say, all right, let's install it. I got my admin team, they're doing all this stuff. Awesome. Here you go, organization, you've got Jira Line. And they're looking at like, what the, this doesn't match our process or our practices. And so all of a sudden, we bring in tooling, we've only got half of the pie. Now, what if we only go to the transformation office and we're going to the transformation group, that group that focuses on bringing out practices, and we're saying, hey, we're going to work with you, but not our group. All of a sudden, we start losing standards. We start losing the ability to scale this product. And so for me, I say, the only way, and I will put money, we're in Vegas, I will put money on. The only way that large-scale enterprise success happens is when you bring those two together. You have to have tooling and process together. If you don't, you may see some light success, but you will never truly unleash that potential of your transformation without that. So with that said, I'll get off my soapbox now. I had to have my moment there, so I feel better. All right, so let's get back into this thing. So I talked about that center of excellence in COE, that COE center of excellence LACE aspect, because what you're going to see along the way is it's going to, based on our level of value, that growth is going to occur, and we've got to help work with that team. Now, a couple other things to note here. Bottom left-hand corner of your chart, you've kind of got our little legend that talks about the different elements you're going to see. We're going to see areas where, again, I'm from Atlassian, I'm from our advisory team, and I am going to talk about how some services and things like that help support this. Not to sell you, but to at least tell you how that gets supported. We're going to talk about where TAMs, where partners, where Atlassians can come into place. We're also going to tell you about where you come into place, too. What do you need to own in this journey? And we're going to talk about some artifacts, too. Specifically, one of the artifacts I want to bring to attention is one that we use in Jira Align all the time, and it is called our program blueprint. So a lot of time when organizations take on a product like Align, they're like, hey, we're rolling this out to our program, but we're not sure how to best use it to extract the value. For us, with Jira Align, we've actually built a set of practices that says, hey, from our experience in industry, we've got hundreds of years of agility coaching on our team. What would we use Jira Align for? What are the jobs to be done? And so we've outlined that in context of products like Jira Align, and we're starting to use other products too, like advanced roadmaps. So you can see that here, where you can unlock those artifacts. Along with that, we also consider this idea of platform optimizations. When you look at a journey, along the way, we're going to make changes to our platform to best support the value extraction that we're trying to do. So this is just an example of a customer who's looking at, hey, what are the different things I'm trying to get better at along the way? This is something we can use your help with as we're working with you. All right, so I think at this point we can start painting a picture for you. So we've kind of laid out the template. So first things first is I got to get rid of that LACE, because guess what? We don't have any maturity yet laid out on the board. We've got to show how that maturity grows. So for us, let's go ahead and talk about how we start. So typically in an organization, we're starting to initially gain that team agility. We're starting to think about, hey, with our products, how do we start thinking about common standards with Jira? How are we starting to think about how we use products and what do we use them for? We have to have this in place before we can move into higher levels of agility, because higher levels of agility do require us to work as a system. So if you're familiar with systems thinking, it's that idea that sometimes we have to give up some local autonomy for some system value. And so for us, we might say, in order for us to move into program agility, we're going to spend some time saying, hey, we've got to get our team level performing well, and then we start moving into program. So what you'll see here in some of the colors, just to kind of describe it on the screen, notice how the customer color, we're having the customers in these journey conversations really owning this, owning that center of excellence, owning that LACE. And for us along the way, you might be bringing in Atlassian or a partner to help you hone in that agility, hone in that team agility, that program agility. But as we're there, our goal is that you own this journey. You take that to the next level, and that's part of our goal, is to get you enabled to do that. And then as you imagine, as you continue to build on this, you start saying, hey, once we get that program agility. One of the things I did with Jira Align is we go out, we do our initial jump starts to get customers onboarded. And a lot of customers say, well, I want to start with portfolio first. And we say, all right, that's great. Well, tell us about your program practices. Well, we don't really have any yet. Well, how do you hope to roll the data up? And that usually is a very sobering moment to say, we've got to think about how our data comes together if we're going to make good decisions on it. So it's all about, again, helping our customers think through that. And of course, as you're going, you can see the trajectory. You can see how we're building upon this. Along the way, you're going to see this is where we start dropping in elements. Along each part of that journey, you're going to be optimizing your system. Along each part of that journey, we're going to be talking about different artifacts that can help you too. Things like those blueprints. How do we help you think about that level of agility to help, again, improve your system step by step? Now, one last element to talk about here is the TAM. So if you're leveraging a TAM within this space, this is where your time back to Atlassian comes into play, where you start saying, hey, they're partnering with you along the way. To me, again, when I talk to customers about this and show them, this kind of process, the goal is saying, hey, you own this journey. Our goal is to support you, to be that trusted advisor through that. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how this picture lays out. So let's actually talk about how this might actually play out when we're using it. So I like to talk about this as phases. So here's our picture again. But what if we laid out a little bit of time on this? So let's say we were thinking about our Agile journey. Remember that picture that says, oh, we're moving like this? Well, what if we started thinking about how we progress in that journey? And maybe we might do it in phases. We might do it in the first phases, like we're talking about team and program agility. We're trying to figure out how we get better. I've had some customers that what we'll do from an Align perspective is we go in, we're working with them to get Jira Align set up, and they realize we've got to get some team level agility in place. So phase one is all about us saying, let's go get our teams in place, let's get those first few programs launched, and then we can start moving into future phases. As those phases progress, you might see some changes in complexity. Down at the bottom, you can notice that we may even say, hey, there could be differences in, I'm not doing my slide thing. There might be differences in the types of users you're bringing on. Maybe you're an organization that has less than 250 users, and maybe your agility really only needs to be a program. And when you're at that, you might be using products like Jira Software, Advanced Roadmaps, Trello, and Confluence. But as you continue to progress, you notice that as you're looking to achieve like higher levels of agility, you may be using different software for that. And I think that's a key thing to note, is that the software that gets you to where you are right now may not be what gets you to the way where you want to be. That goes with the practices too. And that's where you may be using different things to support that. Ultimately, in the end, you're going to continue to evolve and adapt in that. Now, if we think about this as a way of actually how we roll things out, now we can start talking about being like, well, what if we go through and start actually executing this with a group? So let's take this example in mind. What if we had an organization that says, hey, we need some help rolling out, or we as an organization are going to go out there and help our teams with some team agility work, and we're going to focus on a couple areas, with one program area we're focused on. Then we're going to go over to this portfolio. We've got a bunch of other work. The idea is starting to cascade this over time as we're thinking about rolling this out. So you can start seeing how we're trying to kind of paint this picture. Now, one thing I like to point out here is that notice the phases don't have any dates or time around them. That's intentionally done. For us, it's not about, hey, we got to be to this point by this date. It's the idea of saying, hey, what are our goals? What is that level of maturity we're looking to obtain? And how are we going to go about doing it? And guess what? We're going to assess along the way. We're going to say, hey, where are we at? And does our plan need to change? So it gives you an idea of what we're looking at. So let's actually see some examples. These are going to be real-world examples where we've actually used this with customers to help them articulate that journey. Because a lot of times customers will come and, again, products like Jira Align, they purchase it and they're like, I got 300 licenses and I have no idea how to roll this out. So we say, well, let's talk about your goals. Let's talk about how you're doing it. Here's an example of one that we had a customer mock up with us. They're an insurance organization, multiple products, and they were saying, hey, we have a bunch of teams we need help with. We have a bunch of programs. We're looking at some portfolio. And so they actually went through and they said, well, if we focus on a couple areas of team agility first, and we're going to be needing to do this constantly because we've got multiple product lines, we can then look at those programs. And as we get a couple programs in place, we can then bring in that portfolio. So for them, it was focused on, hey, we just need to visualize, like, what's the impact? How much help do we actually need on this? Because part of that is that. As you think about rolling out products and practices, it's like, well, how much volume is this? So they use this to understand their volume. Another great example here is going to be our consumer products journey. So this is one where I worked with this company. They were looking at Jira Align, and we said, all right, we're going to start with a jump start. If you're not familiar with a jump start, it's us getting a customer set up with Jira Align initially as kind of a lighthouse. And we did a little bit of portfolio work to help them get going. And for them, they said, our first phase is about building this kind of foundation. We want to be able to show our organization and our leaders, this is essentially what's possible for us. And then from there, they said, well, if everything goes good with building the foundation, we want to start establishing structure. These are their words too, which is kind of cool. They want to say, we want to establish structure. They're going to take on some Jira standardization efforts. They're going to go focus on how do we start now actually rapidly rolling this out. And they said, we still want some help from you. So for us at Atlassian or our partners to say, expand some programs. We want to do some more help, maybe get some train the trainer, as well as some help expanding the portfolio. So that way, from those initial onsets, we can start taking on that by ourselves. And this whole goal of this customer was to own that process, own that journey. And so this is what it manifested itself into. And so you can see where their goals were overall. They started out with 2 programs in a portfolio they wanted to use as a lighthouse. Ultimately, they had 20-plus programs, 4-plus portfolios where they were targeting at the end of these phases they were looking at. And so for us, it was them kind of visualizing it and taking this to work with them. All right, so last example, this is one I absolutely love because this is actually a sheet that a customer did. They gave them this and I did some things and then they actually made some modifications to it and owned it. So this is a financial firm and this was their onboarding plan. Came into this company and we had, again, 300 licenses of Jira Line. What are we gonna do with it? How are we gonna make this successful? So for us, we said, we're gonna do something similar. We're gonna go through, let's do a jump start. Let's be able to show again, get a team that's working really well and show them what's possible. The one thing they talk about in many change efforts is don't start with the hardest thing first. So we found the group, in this case, that was most eager to change. They were most excited about this. And they said, you're gonna be our lighthouse. You're gonna be the one that everyone's gonna get excited about. And along the way, we're gonna start talking already about Jira standardization. We're gonna start talking about what kind of templates are we gonna need to help roll this out long term. As we continued there, that customer then actually used the time in that jumpstart to also understand how to roll out the product. So honestly, they didn't have to purchase any more services from us to roll out the program. They learned it all themselves, so they could go do that, and they started doing that. But we stayed around to help them as they expanded the portfolio. And for us, they were able to start seeing that license growth from how they're taking advantage of this for last year. So again, this was cool because, again, this was something where I initially presented this out, and they said, oh, this is cool. And then all of a sudden I said, hey, do you have an updated version of this? So like, yeah, here you go. Here's an updated copy. And I just absolutely love that this was something they used to help visualize that. So these are some great examples of kind of how this could play out. Now, there's a couple big takeaways I want you to have from this kind of conversation. Again, it's not a complex story, but it's incredibly powerful when you think about how you talk about change and how you talk about transforming on solutions in this Agile at scale space. So a couple big things I want you to think about here. One, solution journeys are like fingerprints. You saw that with those examples. Each of those solution journeys, very different than each other. They had some similarities, but it was each customer taking a look and saying, my world's a little different, maybe my levels of agility are a little different. What am I trying to accomplish? And it's us partnering to help kind of figure that out. Additionally, solution journeys continuously evolve. One thing that you may not have noticed is that along the phase lines, you had a little kind of like almost like a retrospective inspect and adapt symbol. The idea of that is that as we finish a phase, we might come up with a plan. Let's actually reflect on that. Once we finish our lighthouse, how did it go? Did we accomplish what we wanted to? Do we have things that we haven't done or we learned that we should take action on? So again, constantly think about this, not as just that stair step A to Z, but hey, we just came across the valley. Oh, crap, we gotta build a bridge now. All right, let's evolve with that. Don't be surprised by it. And really for me, it's going in and it's owning that journey. I think, like I said, one of the big things I look at here is that and many times you say, well, we're just going to roll out software. It's not about rolling out software. It's actually about an experience. It's actually about changing the way we work. And for us, that's where using visuals to help do that is incredibly powerful. Now, as we think about this, I always like to share out the templates that we do this. So one of the things we like to say is, hey, go out there and experiment with this. So coming out of the session, I think it's on to be on the app, you will actually have access to some templates where you can just go and mark this up yourself. Go in and write some things down. Say, hey, what does this look like? And you could be, you don't have to be using any products. You could be just thinking about your change journey or your Agile journey. How would I want to see? Where do I want to go? And so check out these templates afterwards or come see me and I can make sure you can directly get them. So I think for us, one of the things I like to leave these kind of things with is this idea that sometimes it's a journey that teaches you a lot about your destination. Our famous philosopher Drake kind of coined that. But he's so right. He's so right. It's that aspect of, it's not the journey, it's the destination. It's not the destination, it's the journey. But it's that piece that we're going to learn along the way. So as you're going out there, go experiment with that. I highly encourage it. Play around with it, and then get back to us. So one of the things, like I mentioned too, you're going to notice those slides over at the Enterprise Services desk there in the center area of the expo floor. Go talk with those folks, Dan, Anthony. Their whole goal is to help our customers think about how do you become successful as you're rolling out the software, not just in the software, but the practices itself. So with that said, kind of a short presentation. Thanks again for coming today. I appreciate it.